G'day legends, I hope you're having a fantastic day. Now we have a fair bit to talk about today. Of course, we're going to have a look at the maps. We firstly though have to look at the incursion that has happened between Ukraine going into Russia as well in multiple locations and launching an assault in there. We need to look at the Il-76 aircraft that has been downed in Russia. We'll look at US aid and of course a look over another HIMARS system which has either been destroyed and or badly damaged. And we'll go over a little bit of all of this, maybe not in that order. But last year, right around this time, we saw multiple crossings by Ukrainian-backed units into Russia. And it seems that these crossings have actually started again with yesterday, the Russian Volunteer Corps, as well as a few others, have conducted what seems to be a limited incursion into Western Russia, specifically Kursk and Belgorod. So let's have a look at the map. So of course, here is Ukraine, here is the capital of Kyiv. These red areas have been occupied since 22 and the purple since 14. Now, a few places you'll need to know for the next couple of minutes is we'll need to know where Kharkiv is, where Sumy is, and of course the border that sits between the two oblasts here. This is Belgorod and Kursk here. Now, firstly, we'll show you where these incursions have happened. So we have Kharkiv, and of course, this Belgorod. We can see where the grey in these three locations are here. This is where these forces have pushed in, and as well from Sumy. And then we have the Kursk Oblast. We see Toyotkino here. We see as well another push in those locations. So who are these guys? What are they trying to do? And how successful was this attack? And of course, what we will do is we'll look over some footage, some other maps, line this all up as well. But the official standing of these soldiers is these are Russian citizens who are fighting for Ukraine, Ukraine-backed, and to dismantle what they call the Putin dictatorship, the Putin regime. So they're working from the inside out. Now, this skirts around a lot of issues put onto Ukraine, well, policy problems with not being able to use weapons inside Russia, launching attacks in, that these are Russian citizens. Now, we know as well that there are foreigners working in these units as well, and some of these units have been backed and founded by some very shady figures as well, have been kicked out of the EU and other countries. But basically, this is what it is, to try and persuade Russians inside Russia to rise up against the Russian government. Now, many people say this is actually a better option for Ukraine, to try and get it from the inside out of Russia rather than a war to war. And I wouldn't be surprised if we do see specifically this week more partisan style attacks within Russia, as of course we know this weekend, being the 15th to 17th, is the Russian presidential election, which Putin of course is projected to win. But yeah, we may see a lot more of this kick up. Now, this is Ukraine's statement about these guys. Now, according to spokesman of Ukraine's military intelligence, Andriy Yusov, the units are comprised of Russian citizens acting as part of Ukraine's security and defense forces, helping to liberate Ukraine from the Russian invaders. But these are citizens of the Russian Federation, and at home in Russia, they have the right to do whatever they think is necessary in this situation to protect their civil rights and free their country from Russians, President Vladimir Putin's dictatorship. Now, as well, we have speculated before and have had some information before that these units as well are trained in other places around the world as well to conduct these type of missions. So let's have a look at the footage. How successful was it? So this is just some footage of them crossing then into Belgorod. So you can hear GoPro running through then into these fields and in the tree lines here. None of the footage yet shows anything that clearly. Now, with everything in this war, over the next 24, 48 hours, more and more will come out. And if it doesn't come out, well, it doesn't exist, because footage always pops up of this. Now, we know that they did these incursions in these three areas. That's just some footage of them crossing over there. We know that this then commercial building in Belgrade was hit with a drone as well. You can hear the gunshots in the background. This was just a civilian went out to film. And then you can see then a drone strike in here. Now, he's very lucky there. Now, some people are saying, let me see if I can pause in a better spot, that this is an Australian SIPAC drone. Of course, the Sabotage drone is like a cardboard electric drone that we have seen given to Ukraine and we have seen used before inside Russia as well. Now, I can't tell you if it is or isn't. The only bits that would say maybe to me it is, I've seen people claiming that it is you can't hear it, which means to me it's potentially an electric drone, or it's just on its final run in and gliding in as well. But it doesn't mean that it is a Sabotage either. The problem with the Sabotage drone, and I'm going on a tangent here, but the problem with the Sabotage drone is it's made of rubber bands and cardboard. It's incredibly easy to just copy and imitate. So there's been just very easily made imitations of this drone too, but striking a building there. We're going to look at some more strikes, but all of this comes a day or two after Russia published footage targeting Ukrainian forces for staging attacks in this region, taking out a number of tanks and a self-propelled gun. Now, we're going to look at this. This is why I said we need to know where Sumy and Kharkiv is and the border region down here. So a few days ago, we got this. In general, such episodes often remain outside the public sphere. Such actions of the Russian army, paths to victory, blah, 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 this sort of stuff. But at the junction between Kharkiv and Sumy regions in this direction, the command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine transferred personnel of the Special Forces main directorate, blah, blah, blah. The detachment was given artillery, 5 tanks, self-propelled gun, multiple launch rocket system. The video clearly shows the enemies tried to camouflage themselves in the forest. As a result, scouts, a group covering the state border, promptly discovered the enemy forces. Now, in this as well, they speak about up here, and the formation of the Kiev regime wanted to attack in the Belgorod region. Well, it is clear the enemy wanted an information background. So this came out multiple days ago. Now, this write-up here is just one of many write-ups that went with this footage, and this footage was released, and what I'm saying is 2 days ago. So we have this footage here of said to be in that area, targeting then a self-propelled gun here, and then many other bits of footage targeting then these vehicles that have then moved into the tree line. So I think that this operation was probably planned for then an amount of time and maybe got spotted just before actually then heading in. And I've spoken in length that Russia has seemingly increased its ISR capability in some regions. So that is seeming to line up there, and we'd have another thing to talk about of ISR in a second. But we have some more footage of then the incursion here. So we see then a tank with the Freedom Russian Legion, then flag on top of it here moving through. Now, I believe this footage is actually up in that bit in Kursk, which I'll show you in a second because we will talk about that. So there has been armor then move across. Now, I believe that this footage was actually up in Thankyou here. Now, what is this status of what's going on? Well, it's hard to know. Now, in Thankyou, the Russian forces released this video that we're defending the border of the Kursk region, and this is said to be today. So maybe have been pushed out of there. They attempted to enter the settlement. And the enemy was forced to retreat. So that video is said to be from there. We don't know. Again, we're going to have to just give it a day or two because, of course, there's huge speculation about what's going on. The Russian MOD said this in the morning. Units of the armed forces with the Russian Federation, together with units of the Border Force and FSB, like Intelligence Special Forces sort of banner, in the border zone of the settlement, stopped an attempt to invade, sabotage, and reconnaissance groups of the Ukrainian terrorist formations in the territory of Russia. Now, there's claims that they've killed a couple of hundred guys, whatever, but again, we are just take everything currently with just a grain of salt. But the fighting has seemed to end, and it hasn't seemed to be as successful as the ones last year where they got in and the green actually crossed and they managed to hold some areas for an amount of time. But there are promises that this is going to then happen again. Now, down into Belgrade too, we can see just at the border here that this is said to be one of the tanks that these Ukrainian-backed fighters, the Russian Freedom Legion Federation fighters, whatever you want to call them, were using, and it's said to have hit a mine just on the border here. Now, you can see this is very typical of when a tank has hit a mine. You can see where something has exploded here, and you can see that it has ran its track out. So just on the border there, and you can see the rear sprocket. So this is the drive sprocket on a tank, because of course the engine is in the rear, that the drive sprocket is still spinning, and then that tank has been looking like it is abandoned there just across the border. So we're not sure really how successful this was. We know a drone has gone into the Belgorod administration building too. I'm not sure. The damage still looks fairly limited considering. And let's have a look. Let's actually have a look at the maps and compare them. So we can see then where these three areas are in Sumy and Belgorod and Kursk and Kharkiv, where those borders all meet. Now, this lines up exactly with what then Syriac has said on where those multiple locations of crossing were, so that's good. Situation Northern Front. During the morning, several Russian militias supported by Ukrainian army launched a new offensive on 4 axes. After a brief initial success of the militia, which entered the localities of these areas, the Russian troops regrouped and launched a counterattack, being able to completely reserve the situation, expelling militants from the Russian territory. We do know too, when these happened last year, that Russia did put in more FSB, more troops here. They had to deploy more guys in here because of threats of this, and it has happened multiple times. Today's events had a purely propaganda objective, that liberating the Belgorod and Kursk regions and showing Russian border guards as inefficient and ineffective in defending Russian territory. That is true. This is a propaganda fight. These troops in these numbers, they're not going to be marching to Moscow. They're not going to seize and hold massive swaths of ground. It is a PR thing to try and get more people on their side. However, this operation has been less successful than its predecessors last year, and the result has been a heavy blow to the Free Russian Army militias, who have suffered significant human and material losses, nor has it had the strategic effect of forcing the Russian command to send reinforcements to the area. But there are already significant troops deployed at the border and in the rear, guaranteeing the deterrent effect on the opposite side. The battle continues on Ukrainian soil. So, like I said, more is going to come out of this, and then the commander here of the Volunteer Corps has said, appeal to the command of the Russian Volunteer Corps, the residents and Russian Federation. The main task of the RDK is and will be, this is dismantling the Kremlin regime and will time after carry out raids deep into territory of the Russian Federation, attracting more and more supporters. It is especially important for us to speak on the eve of the fast so-called election. So this ties in why they then did this on the election. Now, more importantly than this is, as this was going on, Ukraine launched a number of domestic drones into Russia. Now, this is in Novgorod, and it has struck an oil facility here. Now, of course, most of Russia's war is supported by their oil and gas industries. Now, this facility has about 5 to 6% of total Russian oil. We don't know how much damage is actually being caused. Someone said half, so you're talking 3%. That said, we're actually unsure, but targeting things like oil and gas will be very effective for Ukraine to try and cut the head off of where the Russian funding for the war is. Now, spokesman for the Freedom of Russian Legion, Alexei Barasnovsky, has said this is only the beginning. This is only the first day of the operation, but the elections, as we know, are only at the end of the week. All the most interesting things are yet to come. We are distracting the reserves, the attention of the Russian army. They are forced to transfer reserves. This is also our contribution to the defense of Ukraine. So, again, the elections are coming up this weekend. Expect to see a lot happening and more things then like this. Now, I spoke about this increase in ISR capability. Now, we need to have a look over one more thing, which I have lost in here somewhere. It's in this. So we've seen that it was apparently seen early. It just tends to line up between Sumy and Kharkiv, and maybe not as successful, although any crossing in here is a great propaganda victory, and we don't know how much success it actually has had yet. But we've had this come out. Now, we know that Zelensky was down in Odessa down here, and a missile dropped near him. Now, what was said was that a missile hit on the ports. Now, the reporting initially was very different of what exactly was hit. One side saying this was just a civilian building was hit. The other side saying that Zelensky was awarding soldiers for their drone boats going out and destroying a Russian ship in the Black Sea. And then once he left, then the missile then hit this area. Now, that does seem to line up, as Ukrainian pages today have been sharing. Funerals have been held for 6 Ukrainian Navy officers who were killed on the 6th of March in an Iskander missile strike on the Odessa port. So we have these 6 gentlemen here who have been killed in that strike, of course, working in the Ukrainian Navy. Now, Ukraine does not have any Navy ships. They've got some boats, but they don't have ships. That these guys most likely were working on those drones, which are incredibly important. And like we have said, it does seem that there has been an ISR capability increase there, as well as we have had a second HIMARS system. As you can see, the HIMARS here. Now, the speculation is that this is a fake, that this is just a model of one. Now, we know that that does exist, but I don't know, you can't just use that directly. And it does seem like there is some movement here, but it isn't good enough footage, and it does seem that the vehicle may have moved slightly. And then we have a Tornado S, seeming like a Tornado S. Of course, not an eye scanner, because you can see the airburst and then the scatter of then the shrapnel here. And of course, just missed the vehicle a little bit. Let's have a look here. That said, some have said, oh, this will have light damage. It's armored. I don't think people understand how much damage shrapnel actually does. This vehicle will either be heavily damaged or destroyed. Now, it doesn't explode. What people saying, why didn't it explode? That's why it's a fake. It may have fired at salvo. It may just not have exploded. It's not like in a movie where you shoot a car and it then explodes, and it may not actually have anything on it. Or it could be a fake. But what it does tie in to say to me is, tying back to what I've spoken about in the last couple of days, is there does seem to be a ISR increase in these areas. Now, Russia has had as well an Il-76, of course, a large transport aircraft, similar to, like, say, a C-17, taken down, well, has crashed, I should say, in Russia. And we have some footage of this, and it's still unsure what exactly has happened. So we see it flying here with an engine on fire. It said that they tried to extinguish the engine. There's another video of the engine actually falling off the aircraft at one point, and then the plane has gone down. There is footage of it downed as well. We have more footage here. So you can see this far right engine is on fire and was attempting apparently to turn back and land. Now, I'm no aircraft expert, but I always thought these planes could fly on like way less engines than they had, that if they've got 4, they could lose 2 or even 3 depending, and actually make it emergency somewhere. But this has been confirmed as down by Russian media sources here, that the engine caught fire. The cause is unknown. Now, a lot of people saying this is Ukrainian intelligence sabotage on this, as well as someone who sends me some stuff said, yes, this was a sabotage mission and there was money involved in this. Currently, unsure. None of that is confirmed, but the plane was carrying 8 crew members and 7 passengers. The ministry did not say about their fate, but emergency service said all those on board have died. So plane goes down, you're probably going to die. So that has been either downed or has crashed there. But either way, either way, there is a hit to the transport network of Russians' aircraft there, and they've lost another Il-76 earlier in the year. That was the one said to have been carrying the Ukrainian POWs, which Russia said they're going to transfer the bodies, but I haven't seen any update yet on this. Now, well, a lot of pages have been sharing this video here that a Su-27, a Russian Su-27, of course, a air superiority fighter, was downed, but this footage is actually a few years old from the beginning of the invasion. You can go back through and find it as well. Geo confirmed does do a really good job of these like small investigations about when people are sharing something that's untrue as well. So that didn't happen, and I still see people sharing it. Now we have a little bit of footage I just want to show you about these glide bombs. Now, there's some weapons that have really shown their success in this war. Of course, the drone boats for Ukraine are massive. The FPV drones for Ukraine are massive. I think the Lancet for Russia has been huge. And more recently, these glide bombs that are mixing cost effectiveness and effect on target massively. And I just want to show you a little bit of footage just to see how these are actually dropping and how these work. So you can see them dropped from under the wings of this aircraft here. The aircraft turns back because we know they scream in, drop them, and then they need to get out of dodge quickly. But you can see that these salvo of 4, so say these are 4 500 ones, so 2 tons of munitions being dropped here. Of course, I know that doesn't translate to the amount of bang, but then you can see the glide wings then pop out, and then they're on their way out to 60 kilometers, depending on the variant, with small corrections done by onboard systems. But the whole point of these is Russia has that many of these like dumb bombs, can produce them very easily, and they're significantly cheaper than a missile, that we're going to see an increase of these. Now, as well with these, the only weapon system that can really engage these planes is the Patriot system, really. But you need to remember that they can drop these well behind the line. We're talking out to, say, then 60 kilometers. Let's just use 60. So the planes will come in here, we'll drop them, and then head back. Now, remembering that these systems like Patriot can't be used inside Russia. So it's just this area of which they can actually then be engaged. Now that is, of course, very, very rough measures, but there is a limited time of exposure of the aircraft to they don't need to get as close. Now, we will have a look at the maps just in 1 second, but I want to talk about the attack that happened down on Taganrog down here of the Ukrainian drones targeting this facility. Of course, that does the upgrading for aircraft and, of course, the production of the new Russian AWACS being the A100, not the A50. Now, one thing I think, if this is still here, it's probably a really silly spot for the Russians. Like, look how big bloody Russia is, move it away further so it's easier to defend. But we have had an MOD update about this. Now, remember the footage we saw of this, there was massive claims about what was hit. The 2 satellite images show minimal damage. Yes, something was definitely targeted, but as far as damage, there's 3 planes still on the airfield which had seen very little damage and maybe some debris. But on March 9th, an uncrewed aerial vehicle drone launched from the Ukrainian Armed Forces struck areas across here, maintenance facility in Taganrog, Rostov. The Taganrog site used for produce, upgrade, maintain and repair the A50. Of course, very important planes. It's also a broader strategic significance for Russia. It also serves as long-range strategic bombers, transport aircraft and centre for the next generation AWACS, the A100, which is to come into service apparently at the end of this year. We're not sure the production on that if we get pushed. The constant presence of active air defence positioned around the site is indicative of its importance. That's probably why it looks like those were engaged and it was debris falling. Anyway, the loss of the A50U from Russian operations highly likely significantly degrades situational awareness. Images of the damage caused by the attack that's circulating online appear to show damage to 2 large buildings associated with the A50U fleet. I'll show you those. Highly likely used to shelter aircraft during periods of deep maintenance. 2 weeks after the loss of a second A50U, the fleet highly likely remains grounded from flying support Ukraine missions. This attack demonstrates Ukraine's operations to reach strategically significant targets in Russia, blah, blah, blah. So I disagree with this. Now, of course, those A50Us were targeted and they have had a big effect on Russia's capability in the air because of A50s. AWACS are incredibly important. But to say that there's a significant degrade in situational awareness, well, the cause and effect has not shown that. Since these 2 have been taken down, we've seen a Patriot system, 2 HIMARS, and the attack at Odessa, and the attack up in the north as well between those 2 regions. So it does actually seem to me that the situation has increased somehow. Now, is there something new in play that's worth talking about? Can there be a system that bridges the gap between the A50Us down and the A100? Some are saying the Su-57s are bridging that gap, but I think just from the footage we're getting, that we've actually had an increase in situational awareness, even if those have been grounded. Now, I know correlation doesn't mean causation, but still, I disagree with what they've said there, but probably much smarter people than I. Now, we need to have a look at the maps. Now, of course, we explained where everything is on this. Now, the only change on the maps today is if we come, or on the deep state, I should say, if we come down to Pisky here, Pervomayski, this is then Avdiivka. So we just see near Nevelsky, we see that it does look like Russia gained a little bit of ground. Of course, when I say only change, I'm not excluding what we talked about right in the beginning, that Russia gained just a small bit of ground in there. Now, let's see what Surek says about this. After the capture of Nevelsky, Russian troops have begun to enter new parts of Pervomayski. There are fewer and fewer Ukrainian soldiers in the locality. However, despite early rumours, the Ukrainian forces are not expected to collapse so easily. We're talking about a high and open terrain full of small fortifications, so Russian advances will continue to be slow. Moreover, the Russian command does not have priority on this front, but the Avdiivka and Ugledar fronts require more attention now. So that there is more attention up in Stepovy, Olivka, Tonenki, and as well down sort of the Mariinka to Ugledar area, Novomaya-Livka, and that this is sort of on the back burner at the moment. But are saying that in here, that Russia has got more territory. They're saying at least in here. Now let's have a look at what's happening around Pervomayski. We'll line then these maps up. So what we saw yesterday with the update was it had crossed down between these 2 reservoirs and had entered in Pervomayski, sort of splitting it. Now this map is showing that Nevelsky has come under then Russian control and this out through here. But again, maps don't line up, maybe in a day or 2, but if they don't, start questioning things. Situation northwest of Donetsk city, Russian army took control over the settlement of Nevelsky. Now we have a second map update here. So we see this has been in this area and then they've just increased control out towards this reservoir period and blocks here up near Pervomayski. Russian army made new advances at Pervomayski, taking control of a big part of the plantations east of this pond and urban area. So there has been, we know there's been some advance here because the deep state shows there has been some, but nowhere near to the degree what then the Syriac is saying. But up and down the front line everywhere else, it's not showing any changes. It's not showing what is said to be a large change in Robotny either yesterday. So unsure. We will maybe see the next few days. But one thing I do want to talk about is we have a bit of footage between Nova Pokrovka and Robotny here from a Russian drone, has just showed the amount of shelling that has sat between these two areas. You can just see the whole landscape just pockmarked here as well. So these areas, it needs to be stated again and again that the fighting is hell everywhere, even if we don't see the front line itself actually moving. Now we need to talk a little bit about US aid. So the US has given another $300 million package to Ukraine today. Now, of course, what we do know is Biden still has a few $billion left that he can transfer out of the Pentagon in his drawdown fund, but they're trying to get more money through Congress, Senate to refill or to fund Ukraine further. And it has been an amount of months before there's been really new funding. But military deal, the US will send Kyiv additional anti-personnel, anti-material APM missiles, which are an older version of the ATACMS. Of course, the ATACMS have 300k range, and then these have more, I believe, like 160, I could be wrong. Oh, so missile can travel 100 miles, maybe 160 Ks, and carry warheads containing hundreds of cluster bomblets. And the clusters have proven to be effective-ish, but it seems like one of the big things with the clusters is actually that Ukrainians are cutting them and then open and using them on their drones, using those bomblets on the drones, as instead of just clusters dropping, they're individual clusters then getting targeted as well. So it's just interesting to see the development, I guess, on the ground in the trenches of even systems like this. Now, Poland has sort of had a bit of a call out of what's going on as well in the US. So this is from then The Guardian. House Democrats are gathering signatures for a discharge petition which can circumvent the Speaker Mike Johnson. So it goes around him, vote can go through, therefore potentially still put that aid onto Ukraine. Well, I think what people need to realise is even if Mike Johnson lets it go to the floor, it still needs to pass the floor. Like, it still needs to get up there. Like, yes, he's blocking it currently, but it still could fail on the vote too, potentially. That said, with any of these discharge petitions, I think you're sort of signing a death wish for your party. I think people will lose faith in that system, especially as we know we're in election year. Anyway, but of course, that's the $95 billion package. A grouping of centrist Republicans has launched a separate discharge petition for a smaller $66 billion bill that would include US-Mexico border security provisions. So, of course, there's going to be a much smaller package in that one for Ukraine. So, again, what's actually happening in the House? God, we don't know. Will they circumvent Mike Johnson? Will they not? Will it go to the floor? Will there be correct border control measures put in place with the funding and it go through onto the floor? We don't know. But Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk has warned Johnson on Tuesday that the fate of millions of people and thousands of lives depend on whether Johnson allows the vote, saying this is not some political skirmish that only matters on the American political scene. Mr. Johnson's failure to make a positive decision will cost thousands of lives. He takes personal responsibility for that. And this is after then he's gone and met in the White House with the President Duda and, of course, Joe Biden. Of course, we know Biden wants to push that funding through. The Democrats want to get it through, but it is being held up. But I guess, what do you think of the money going through? We are unsure how this is actually going to look, where this is going to move. And if that doesn't go through, what then happens for Ukraine? As we do know, Ukraine is already having a huge shell shortage, and a manpower shortage, which the manpower shortage is much harder to fix than the shell shortage. But legends, big day, I guess, on the front with incursions into Russia, aircraft being shot down. But as far as movements on the map, everything is very, very limited at the moment. As we know, we're sort of in a lull, according to both Ukraine and Russian sources. We're going to see another Russian offensive soon. I think there's a bit of a build-up there, as well as the elections, and then go on from there. But legends, look after yourself. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.